pleasure. So first of all, my name is Jamie Gass. I'm director of the Center for School Reform at Pioneer Institute, which is a Boston-based think tank. It's been very active in education reform for the last 20 some odd years or so. We're independent, nonpartisan 501c3, which means we do not do any lobbying or endorsing of political candidates whatsoever. But I want to thank the chairman for the opportunity to come and share with you the research that we have done about the Common Core. So just to begin, I'll give you a little bit of context of what the Common Core actually is, because even though Massachusetts adopted Common Core in the summer of 2010, the fact is that a great number of school committees, boards of selectmen, municipal officials across the state and across the country really don't know a lot about what Common Core is. Common Core is a set of English and math standards that were developed by the National Governors Association, which represents the governors of each state, not the states, but the governor of each state, and the Council of Chief State School Officers, which is the commissioner of education for each state. The lion's share of the funding for the development of Common Core, which are national standards, was the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. You all know Bill Gates, he's the founder of Microsoft, and they've put in over $200 million over the last 5 or 6 years to develop and to advocate for Common Core. Common Core is met also with two sets of national testing. There are 2 testing consortia. There's the PARC testing consortium, which Massachusetts is part of, and then about 12 states are in currently. And then there's the Smarter Balance testing consortium, which has about 17 states. So at this point, there is a majority of the states that are no longer in either of the 2 testing consortia. Like Massachusetts, the states that adopted Common Core and these testing regimes did so during the 2009-2010 federal grant called Race to the Top, which is a $4.3 billion grant from the federal government in which states had to sign on to various policy objectives from the U.S. Department of Education in order to be eligible for federal funding. Massachusetts, in the Race to the Top, received about $250 million. So to give you some context of how we got to this place, both in Massachusetts and nationally, I'll give you this kind of brief overview. The reality is that the country started off as a loose collection of colonies along the eastern seaboard and gradually grew to be the most powerful country in the world, primarily through the Founding Fathers' commitment to federalism, which is a balance between state and local authority in domestic matters and larger national authority as it related to foreign policy and trade and defense. But sometime after World War II, the evidence began to become clear that the United States, which had previously been among the highest performing countries in the world in both English and mathematics, was sliding. The earliest example of that was Sputnik during the space race. But by 1983, there was a commission, a national commission, put forward by President Reagan called the Nation at Risk. And what it did is it outlined that the country had fallen to between 11 or 17 in the world in terms of our ability to compete, particularly in the area of math and science. That Nation at Risk report said that if we had the system of public education imposed on us by a foreign enemy, that it would be an act of war. That's how badly we had fallen. Different states came up with different solutions, and lots of different people around the policy community for decades now have been coming up with different prescriptions. For quite a long time now, there's been a group that have gathered around the Governors Association, the Council of Chief State School Officers, Achieve Inc., other trade organizations in Washington, D.C., that had believed that the source of and remedy for our problems in K-12 education is a set of national standards, testing, and curriculum. There's been other people that believe that the way to improve it is to have greater school choice, whether it's through private or parochial school choice or folk tech schools or what have you, but the choice will add competition to the system and improve the quality and the number of choices for parents. What Massachusetts did in 1993 was really quite different from what anyone else was thinking about, and it proven to be historic reforms. At the time, Republican Governor Bill Weld got together with Mark Roosevelt, Democrat from Beacon Hill, and Tom Birmingham, who later became the Senate President, a Democrat from Chelsea, and they crafted the landmark 1993 Massachusetts Education Reform Law. And in a nutshell, what that law did was exchange a great deal of additional resources at both the state and the local level, and we've spent about, well over $100 billion, that's billion with a B, in exchange for all the difficult things that people in K-12 education have generally not wanted to do. Things like MCAS testing for a graduation requirement, a return to traditional math, science, history, and English for academic standards, charter schools which are independent public schools, and inject some choice into the system, teacher testing so that the students and the teachers are being tested on the same academic material. And then a sort of an audit agency that evaluated how the money was being spent and how the districts were getting up to the reforms that were expected under the law. So really there's two conversations going on in this country. There's all the things that Massachusetts has done over the last 20 years, and then which have proven to be historically successful, and then the rest of the country, which is still stuck in the kind of stagnation and decline that I mentioned going back to the nation at risk in 1983. Specifically, Massachusetts participated in a test called the NAEP test, which is the Nation's Report Card. It's been around for about 35 years or so. Every state in the union takes it every 2 years. No state had ever been number one in every grade tested, in every category tested, and in 2005, Massachusetts was the first state in the history of that test to do so. Then we were raised 5 times in a row and doing it in 4 games straight each time.
Pretty good.
But the Nation at Risk report really talked about the need to have our states, and we really don't have a national system of education. We've got a collection of state systems, because even at this late date, where the growth of the federal government has moved into K-12 education, 90% of the funding comes from the state and local level. But what the goal really was to be able to compete internationally. You had to be able to compete with countries like Hong Kong and Singapore and South Korea and Japan. So in 2007, Massachusetts tested as its own individual country. It was one of only 2 states in the union to do that. And the TIMS testing, which is really the gold standard in international math and science testing, illustrated is that Massachusetts 8th graders were tied for #1 in the world in science. And then we were within the top 4 in the world in mathematics. This is a remarkable and historic accomplishment. If doing well on domestic testing is like winning the World Series, winning the TIMS testing is like winning a World Cup or a gold medal. And we did that both in 2007 and we did that once again in 2011. So it's really a remarkable accomplishment. So in 2009, when the federal government came down the pipe with the race to the top, we knew here in Massachusetts that in fact it was the race to become Massachusetts. Every other state in the union, and we've been to 35 states or so within the last 4 years providing testimony for the legislatures and boards of education, every state knew that Massachusetts was the highest performing, and that's why the advocates of Common Core had to have Massachusetts sign off on Common Core and discard our previous academic standards, which had led to these historic gains, which is exactly what Massachusetts did in the summer of 2010. While most people were at the beach and relaxing and having a good time, the State Board of Education in late July, voted to replace these historically successful academic standards with totally unproven Common Core. So what our researchers did, being researchers, the first thing we did is look at the academic quality. So we enlisted a woman named Sandra Stotsky, who had worked on the high quality Massachusetts standards, but it also is a nationally recognized expert in reading. She had been appointed to develop the standards in Indiana, which were considered among the best in the country. She had worked on the standards in Texas and a handful of other high standard states. And we coupled her together with a guy named Jim Milgram, who's a professor of mathematics at Stanford University. He had worked on the very high quality math standards in California. And what in 4 consecutive drafts of Common Core, both in English and math, illustrated, and these are all pieces of research that are online on our website, they mapped out in very careful detail that at every step of the way, Common Core was of lower academic quality than what Massachusetts, Indiana, California, Texas, Minnesota, and the high standard states already had. Specifically in English language arts, they ignored the evidence from Massachusetts that the focus of English ought to be actually English in literature and poetry and drama, the quality of the vocabulary and language found in things like Huckleberry Finn, Charles Dickens, Sherlock Holmes, Edith Wharton. These not only enrich children's mind, but they build vocabulary that moves towards genuine college readiness and preparedness for the workforce. In the mathematics side, Common Core decided to ignore the evidence from both Massachusetts and California and pushed off access to Algebra 1, which 15,000 pieces of research to illustrate that is the gateway for all higher level mathematics. You have to have Algebra 1 at 8th grade, as the previous Massachusetts standards did and the California standards did, in order that kids would be able to get to pre-calculus, calculus, and trigonometry so that they are able to compete in the STEM fields, which is science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. So that's the reduction in the academic quality under Common Core. The next piece that we looked at was the legality, because there are 3 federal laws that explicitly prohibits the federal government from funding, directing, validating national standards testing and curricula, which is precisely what happened under the federal race to the grant application. So we enlisted a guy named Ken Talbert and Bob Eitel. They were the general counsel and deputy general counsel at the U.S. Department of Education under the second Bush administration. So they're the 2 highest ranking lawyers in the federal government under the previous administration. And what they mapped out is that the 3 federal laws are the Elementary and Secondary Education Act of 1965, signed by Lyndon Johnson, the General Education Provisions Act of 1970, signed by Richard Nixon, and the enabling legislation that set up the U.S. Department of Education itself in 1979, which is signed by President Jimmy Carter. 2 of the 3 federal laws that were signed that prohibit the federal government from advancing national standards testing and curricula were signed by Democrats. I think it's just worth noting. But they also, these 2 lawyers also noted that by the direct funding of the PARCC testing consortium, which Massachusetts is in, and the Smarter Balance, that this was an additional breach of federal law, specifically because the General Education Provisions Acts make it clear that if the federal government is going to be pushing national testing, that it must then go back and specifically ask permission from Congress to do so. That did not happen under the race to the top, and that has not happened with the funding of the PARCC consortium. Now the final piece of research that we have looked at, which is probably most relevant to the work before you, is the cost. Because even though the advocates of Common Core have spent over $200 million advocating and developing Common Core, very few, and I think it's less than 5% of the governors in the country, less than 5% of the state legislatures or state budgets offices, and less than 5% of the state departments of education or boards of education actually did a cost-benefit analysis of what it'll cost for states and localities to adopt and align their K-12 education work with Common Core. So we enlisted a guy named Ted Barber. He had worked in the U.S. Department of Education under the first Bush administration and under the first administration of President Clinton. So he worked for both Republicans and Democrats. He was the kind of staffer that was on Capitol Hill in the room with people like President Clinton and former Speaker of the House Newt Gingrich and former Senate Majority Leader Bob Dole, negotiating the small amount of federal funding in K-12 education. He also had extensive experience in testing. And what he and his researchers came up with is that it's going to cost the states and localities, again, who will pay for 90% of this, it's going to cost them $16 billion to align their textbooks, their technology, and their professional development with teachers to the Common Core. So Massachusetts has already spent well over $100 billion to be #1 in the country and internationally competitive. We will have to spend, according to their projections, another $350 to $360 million to align our standards and our textbooks and our technology to what I think are demonstrably lower quality standards. Specifically, the multi-year technology costs are the largest cost driver. For Massachusetts, it'll be about $160 million via your school committee or through the request from your your school department, you may have already seen requests for additional funding for technology in schools. It'll cost $140 million for professional development teachers, and $60 million for textbooks. So irrespective whether the town of Georgetown bought new textbooks in 2009 or 2010, prior to Common Core adoption, all those textbooks would have to be thrown out because the new textbooks will have to be aligned with Common Core and the PARCC testing. The final piece of research that we've looked at has to do with the collection of student-level data that is required under both the Race to the Top as well as through the PARCC testing consortia. The federal government, under FERPA laws, which are parental privacy laws, are prohibited from collecting these kind of student-level data. That's how they use the federal grant program to create incentive for the state to do what the federal government prohibits them from, federal law prohibits them from doing. We did a larger paper that was released, just a few months ago called Cogs in the Machine. It maps out in about 60 or 70 pages, and it's got about 600 footnotes. It's a very exhaustive treatment of this big shift, really, from K-12 education as more of a focus on academics, basic preparation in English, math, science, and history, to really more of a workforce development model where state and federal employees will have a greater hand in trying to help pick and choose and direct where students go in terms of their careers. So I could go on and on. You've been incredibly patient. There's a lot of details, but I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have.
So is it mandatory that we adopt the Common Core, or is that a local district decision?
So the adoption of the Common Core to replace the state standards, or state curriculum frameworks, that was done by the State Board of Education. The Board of Education has not formally adopted the PARCC testing. The Commissioner of Education in Massachusetts, Mitch Chester, however, is the chair of the PARCC consortia. So I think there's a pretty good bet that he's going to be trying to encourage the localities to do so. For this year, it's still the district's decision. And I think it's running about 50-50 across the Commonwealth. It's that the districts are either deciding to stay with the MCAS test or go to PARCC.
So is there any point where the MCAS is sunset in Massachusetts where you have to move over to the PARCC?
Well, if the State Board of Education formally adopts PARCC, that will replace MCAS, and I think that their expectation is that MCAS will then gradually, over the next year or two, become obsolete.
So, from my perspective as a member of the Board of Selectmen, I mean, thank you for all the information.
Yeah.
Information is always good to have, but I don't think it's our decision. We don't have any jurisdiction over this other than if the school committee comes to us and says they've adopted core and they need, a 10% increase in their budget. I don't see where this is really our decision to make. This is a decision. This is why we have an elected school committee. We have a very good superintendent, and we have a very good school committee. This is their decision, and if they decide to move to Common Core, that's their decision. Now, that being said, I'm sure they'll be having public hearings and informational sessions, and if parents in this town are not happy with that, they should be attending those meetings and letting the school committee know their feelings. I mean, and I've had a discussion with the chair. I don't see where this is even any of our concern, other than from a budget perspective. And we haven't heard from the school committee yet to say, hey, we need an extra $400,000 besides our normal increase to handle this. Again, I don't, if we turn over something to Essex County Greenbelt, a piece of property, we don't call the school committee and say, hey, what do you think? Again, this is maybe more of a larger picture. So, again, I thank you for the information, but as far as I'm concerned, this is a school committee issue, and totally a school committee issue, and really not a selectman issue for me personally. I'll speak for myself.
Well, there's many school committees, or a handful of school committees, have begun to vote not to adopt Common Core. There's, I think Peabody is one that decided not to do that. The thing that's important to keep in mind, though, is that while the state can set the standards, right, and they can set the testing, all matters related to curriculum are local issues. So the state really has no ability to dictate to the school committee what it is that they must teach in terms of the curriculum. And then, of course, you're right, you folks allocate the funding.
Right.
So it's your decision about whether that's a policy decision you want to support or not.
I mean, because, there's probably another group that would sit here and totally support Common Core, and
Probably.
you seem to be on the other side based on your research.
Yeah.
Again, for me as a selectman, I think it comes down to where the dollar's gonna be spent and what's the request from school committee. I can ask school committee, I can ask the chair if that's okay. Have you decided to move to Common Core? Where are we with your decision?
Well, this year, we chose as a committee to stay with MCAS for the year. And that was, it wasn't done quickly. We had several meetings, and we chose to stay with MCAS. We are not a race to the top district, so we did not take the money, even though I'm sure it would have come in handy, but we chose not to under the superintendent's direction, and we agreed. So with that being said, we haven't, we're building a new school, we're getting new technology at the new school, and we really don't have any idea how much money it would cost right now, to go with the brand new computers that would be required to take the part, because it is a computer-based test.
Right.
So,
Well, can I
Go ahead.
just interject? Yeah, my name is Pam Lundquist, and I'm on the school committee. And I picked up the phone and I spoke with a very nice gentleman from the Department of Education today. His name is Bob Leakham. I don't know if you know him. He's the MCAS Chief Analyst and Interim Park Coordinator. And I asked him a number of different questions. And one of my questions was, what is the recommendation for technology that a school district should have on hand in order to administer the park? And he said that the current recommendation is as many computers per school as the largest class. So for the high school, if the largest class had 120 students, then it would be 120 computers. So you would stagger the taking of the test by, some in the morning, some in the afternoon. Right. So starting at 0, so I added up, I looked at for next year, just because, say, next year we don't have a choice about administering park, if that were the case. We'd be looking at 350 Chromebooks that we would need to have. And that's assuming we have nothing right now, which is not the case at all. We actually have, we have technology available, but assuming we had nothing, it would be 350 Chromebooks at $250 a piece, which would be $87,500. Just to let you know.
Okay.
Because you had mentioned some figure,
Yeah, I just
like
didn't know
$1 million
what,
before,
I just
and
didn't
so
know
we're-
what kind of
that-
numbers you were
that's
looking at. I said
starting
it could be
zero.
$1 million, it could be 100,000, I don't know, so,
Yeah, well, this is less than 100,000 starting at 0, which we're not at 0. So just in terms of the
Yeah, no, that's good.
Chromebooks.
Well, just back to my point, is that, first of all, it's not being mandated. The local district has a choice, so that's up to the school committee and the superintendent. It's only it's different measuring standards, rather than MCAS, you would go to the park test. So they would have to change curriculum in order to teach towards doing well, again, with looking for those skills. Okay, so does that put, if in case we just, like they say they're gonna stay with MCAS, that doesn't put any of our grant money from the state or any other grants or federal money that we get at risk, does it? I mean, that'd be a question for Carol, I think.
No, it doesn't.
Not at this time anyway. Right, so the worst case scenario is the state would mandate this, State Department of Education would mandate this, and here we go with an unfunded mandate. Okay.
Well, I think the thing that's important to keep in mind, so there are a handful of states that have already withdrawn. Texas from the beginning, which is the largest textbook state. From the beginning,
When you say withdrawn, you're saying Common Core?
they're not
in
doing
general?
Common Core, they're not doing Park, they're not doing Smarter Balance. They're
Meaning
not-
they never accepted?
They
race
never,
to the top money or anything?
Texas never even entered the contest to be competitive for any of the money. There are other states that did. Indiana did and has withdrawn. Oklahoma just a couple months
Is
ago.
there a penalty for them in that case?
Well, that's what's becoming clearer and clearer. So there are waivers from the No Child Left Behind law. Every Secretary of Education is permitted to give states waivers from provisions of the law. NCLB was a very onerous law, and that happened under both President Bush and has happened under President Obama. What they're not allowed to do is add additional conditions for receipt of that waiver, like adopting Common Core or being part of the testing consortium or be part of the teacher evaluations or the longitudinal data stuff that has gone along with Common Core. So what's happened is that Oklahoma has voted by law, their legislature passed a bill and their governor signed it to withdraw from Common Core. And immediately the U.S. Department of Education withheld their waiver for No Child Left Behind. So while they are prohibited from doing this, U.S. Department of Education is prohibited from doing it, they can do it. And they have threatened during the process of the adoption of the Common Core through Race to the Top. They said if you're states that don't do it, well, maybe they won't get the Title I money, which is basically money, reading money for poor kids. There's a variety of different kind of bureaucratic levers that the federal Department of Education can exercise on states, and it's also true that the State Department of Education can try to exercise on localities. There's been some of that out in central Massachusetts where the Tantasco Regional School Committee did not adopt Common Core and said that they're not going to do Park. And there's already a kind of wrangling going back and forth between the State Department of Education and the locality. I don't know if that answered your question or not, but that's...
Gary, I know you had some questions.
Yeah, I want to thank you, Stu. Dave, I disagree a little bit. We've been here about, we've been here, when did we start? We've both been here the same amount of time. And I think that we've had many joint meetings with, and I'd say that the school committee is the one committee that we probably had the most joint meetings with the Board of Selectmen. So we obviously get somewhat involved with the school committee, which I think is good. I do agree that it's their decision, but I thank Stu for standing up, because if this is possible a state mandate that's coming down and nobody is aware of this, I really want to applaud him for educating us on this. And he has told me that he intends to get both sides here. And so, I've been trying to figure out on this whole thing, well, if it's just testing, how much can it cost? Okay, you get the technology and this and that. But no, because I think one of the things I've been educated about is because of the testing, we may have to get all new curriculum also, books and that, which is costly. And so if the state is telling us, you may not have a choice. And we know how they are with state mandates. They love to do it, but the funds aren't always there afterwards, even though they say they have to fund it, but they don't. So, if we're opening up the window here for people to see, I mean, I really do think that we need to be involved, because we are the ones that have to go to town meeting floor many times. Yeah, I wish the finance board had been here also, because they're the advisory board, and if this is gonna down the line cost the town money, we have to be aware of it and make the voters aware of it, and I do believe that's what it is. I'd like to also, I think I know we've got some people out there. I think we got an aide from Senator Tarr's office out there. No? I thought.
He was talking about coming, but we haven't seen him.
We haven't seen him? Okay. Well, anyway, look at this. I think it's because of this. I mean, we got quite an audience here tonight also. So, I mean, people haven't known about this that much, that this board was going to do this tonight. But we've got quite an audience here, so.
Well, Gary, to respond to that, I think what I was afraid of is it's too early in the game for us to stick our nose into the decision of the school committee. That was my point.
I don't think it was.
But hey, hear me out. When you hear other things going around town that people are saying, the kids are gonna be fingerprinted and profiled in these databases and all this other stuff, to me, that's a political, it starts to be, this feels like a political issue. Many times through his whole presentation, he's talking about who's a Democrat and who's a Republican. This is, it's turned in, I don't want this to turn into a political issue. That's my only point in all of this, is that I think it was too early to do this. I think the school committee should, do their thing, come back and then educate us. I just felt it was too early in the air, and I don't want to get in the middle of a school committee decision, period.
I don't think we're getting in the middle of the school committee issue. I think what we're doing is we're getting in on what could be a state
Right,
issue.
exactly,
And
that's fine.
I think we need to be there, I really do.
I just wanted to clarify that the only reason why I mentioned that Governor Wells was a Republican and that Tom Birmingham and Mark Roosevelt were Democrats was to show that the Ed Reform Law in '93 was a bipartisan effort. But just to be clear, Pioneer is not a partisan organization. We do not endorse candidates. We don't have any political affiliation whatsoever.
Where do you guys get your funding?
It's all, 3/4 of it is all private funding. A small percentage of it is from foundations. But we have not accepted any foundation money to do any of the work related to the Common Core.
When would this be implemented next year? What's the timeline look like?
So the Commonwealth adopted Common Core in 2010. In theory, then they began immediately beginning to work with
The
school
alignment.
districts to alignment 4 years ago. So we are, in a way, pretty far down the road, but what we also know from the research we've done on MCAS, and I did it almost 10 years ago, was that it's going to take a very long time for the local curriculum and the local work to be aligned with the state standards and the state tests. It was true under MCAS, it'll be true under Common Core. They are really, and people talk about their similarities, they really are entirely different standards with an entirely different outlook, and the testing is completely different.
You know, just no pun intended, but I did not want the school committee to feel like they were being called to the principal's office, okay? That's my whole point now, is, you know, because that's why they're elected, that's why they focus on those issues. If it was if they came to us, hey, we have an unfunded mandate of, $1 million, then obviously we would want to know about that and work through it. I just felt like maybe we were jumping the gun a little bit and bringing people in and saying, hey, why haven't you looked at this? That's my only point. You know. And there was some fear mongering going out there too about kids being fingerprinted and, these databases being set up and, the government, big brothers, now they're keeping tabs on our kids and, so there's some of that going around too, which bothered me. I think that information just needs to be shared with the parents and the general public by the school committee, not in this forum.
No, and I mean, again, we've done testimony across the country, and the reality is that many state legislators, a great number of boards of education know a little bit more about it, but the general knowledge of it, I would describe as definitely low. And in terms of the databases, I just refer to the paper that we did, the cogs in the machine. There's the outlook of the Common Core, and the data mining really runs parallel to it. It's not in the standards. It is true that the park consortia is, they claim they're not going to, but under the application that they gave to the federal government to get, the $170 million to start the park consortium makes it clear that they have to turn over student data to children, to the federal government, and it's not just academic data. The goal of this, the people who have been driving this, Chief Inc. in Washington D.C., the Governors Association, the Council of Chief State School Officers, have a long-held belief that K-12 education is about workforce development. And from their point of view, you have to collect lots of data so that you can make decisions about where people are going to be working. That's all.
And just, again, one last thing is that when I did start my remarks, I did thank you for coming to give us all this information. So again, I just don't want to step on, I don't want to be this body to be out of line and step on anything that the school committee really needs to handle on their own. That's my point.
Are there any questions from the school committee or audience at this point? Sure.
Good to go?
Yeah.
Paul Sadowski, 2 Tall Tree Way. I just want to thank you for all your information tonight. It's been very helpful. I guess the easiest way I could say I understand Mr. Surface's viewpoint, but without Stuart or Mr. Fowler going to the meeting the other night, I just feel like maybe the school committee or the superintendent, the parents don't know a lot of what's going on. So how do we decide? Do we stay? Do we go? Chrome notebooks or whatever. It's a lot of money. Is that another Prop 2.5 override? I mean, there's a lot. Everywhere we turn as parents, there's not much communication here at times with the schools, and that can't continue. Everywhere I look, it seems like we're getting shook down for more money. I mean, it's great early tonight. Mr. Fowler was saying, let's try and shave some money off the 2.5. But, you know, realistically, I mean, what are most people looking at for tax increases coming with this new school? I mean, most of the public doesn't even know, I've talked to Stuart, you know, as the chairman, but a lot of the public doesn't even know, is that school on time? Is it unfunded? Is it on, you know, nobody knows. I mean, the kids are playing like inmates out on Hot Top. I mean, nobody knows what's going on. So it's like, someone's gotta start telling me, because I'm just like, it's rudderless. There's nobody leading the ship here. So I don't think, Mr. Surface, that what Mr. Fowler and Mr. Egenberg did, I applaud them. I think they did an excellent job. I felt like that was perfect. That's what we needed.
Again, I wasn't chastising, but I just wanna make sure.
No, I know.
We're
I
not
know.
stepping on.
And Madam Chair, I hope you feel that way, that this has definitely not come to the
I'm thankful.
the
Mr.
principal's
Surface
office,
was saying
because
that.
that was something that, you know, I fear you had in your head, and that's not the case at all. What I came to you guys with a couple of weeks ago was, as a parent, having followed this for a long time, running in frustration that it has not been discussed openly with the committee and with the town and with the taxpayers, and so that's how we started the dialogue.
What I want to respond to you, Mr. Sadowski, is that Mrs. Lundquist and I both attended that meeting in Newburyport as well,
Okay.
along with Mr. Fowler and Mr. Egenberg, which was not included in the Georgetown Record article. So I do want to say that. There was
No, you
presence
were
there, and
definitely
I'm
there, and
thankful
I
to the
applaud
two
you for
Tendos
that.
for sending
It
me
was
the
great that
email and
you were there.
inviting me to that.
Yep.
It was a very informative evening. I'm wondering why you would direct your questions to the chairman of the Board of Selectmen if you have questions about the new school.
Because if you and Carol, who's running,
I
I
have
mean.
never gotten any requests from you to give you an update on anything, and we do update at
Barbie,
every one of our
my
meetings.
wife and I have met with you on more than a couple times.
Not in regards to the school.
Barbie, we've covered a lot of things when we've met with you in Carol's office. I've mentioned looking for updates. Nobody knows. Since last fall, what's happened, it was just like after the whole arsenic thing, and Carol had a forum down at the high school, it just kind of disappears, you know, and it's like, you know, at some point.
We'll have another one coming up this month.
I know, is it the 16th or something like that?
Yeah.
Yes, there is.
So, guys, I don't wanna get off track here, because we wanna just
No, I
kind of
know.
stay here, and Pam, you had a question or a comment or a thought?
Well, I mean, I do appreciate you coming, Mr. Gass, and explaining all the information that you have, and it is a lot of information, there is a lot to learn. And I appreciate you bringing all this up, Stu, because, you know, I am learning a lot more than I did, although we were already aware of quite a bit. I would just like to ask that in the future, in public, in a newspaper article, there's a reason why this article would cause us to feel like we've been called to task before your committee. You know, we were basically put down. It says here that, you know, we don't know much or anything about the Common Core, which is basically not true. You don't know exactly what we know. You know, if we could just try not to put, you know, public figures, elected figures, try not to put each other down, particularly in print. I mean, person to person, that would be nice. You know, we're trying to teach the students and the children of this town to respect each other and to speak with truth and kindness about each other, and I think it's you know, we can start doing that by setting the example right here. We do try to be as open as we possibly can about all curriculums. We have a curriculum and instruction page on our website. I counted up, I went through the agendas of every single school committee meeting last year, the 2013, 2014 meeting. I came up with 11 different presentations on curriculum-related matters, most of which did mention the Common Core. We have discussed the Common Core many times at our school committee meetings. I know that not, you know, maybe people don't always watch them, but it's an option. And I hope, Mr. Sadowski, you know, take the opportunity to watch this fine entertainment of the school committee meeting.
Believe it or
Because
not,
I have been reporting on the, I am a member of the school building committee, and I have been consistently reporting that we are on time and under budget, and things are going in that way. If those are your concerns, those things are.
I'm just saying, my point's not to insult everybody, but it's just that whether you go to Dunkin' Donuts, you go for a cup of coffee, you're down where there's an event going on, more than enough people state they don't know what's going on.
I
And that's,
understand.
I think that's what I'm saying is the committee from a customer service, public relations standpoint needs to do a much better job
And I
of
do
talking
believe
to the public.
it is our responsibility to get that information out to you. I really do agree with you on that. And that is one reason why I requested a tour of the new school building on October 14th. I'm going to go, I'm going to take a lot of pictures, I'm going to post it on Facebook, we're going to try to get that out there. We try to get our information out in many different venues, and we'll continue to try to do so. And maybe we need to do a better job of informing the public of what curriculums we're choosing. I mean, I think you need to, you know, remember that the Common Core are standards versus the test. But I think, David, you mentioned that it's up to the state to vote whether we adopt the Common Core standards. We, at a local level, decide on the curriculums
Right.
that promote the standards. But I am unaware of the fact that we actually have the legal authority to reject the standards themselves on a town level.
Well, my point to that, Pam, was that
I mean, we
you
have a choice.
you are the school committee, you do run
Yes.
the district. And if you fully vet this and look at it both sides of the equation, pro and con, on if we accept Park or not, or if we stay with MCAS
That's
or
the test.
reject Park.
That's different than the Common Core.
And Common Core as well,
But that's
that there's no reason that you can't lobby the Mass Department of Education, your legislatures. There's no reason you can't band together with, if there were committees of like minds in the state that were either for or against it, there's no reason you can't band together and have a voice and have a share of voice by banding together. That was my point, and I just haven't seen anybody, so to speak, as school committees and all, talking about Common Core, and the parents certainly don't talk about it. And like I said earlier, a couple of weeks ago, it was really, if we were going to change the structure of this government and this town to a charter, we would have a lot of open houses and we would be discussing it a lot, and we would make it a point to put it out there. Well, Common Core just sort of just haphazardly happened quietly by design underneath the cover of darkness, and the school committee wasn't even aware of that, and all of a sudden you guys are sitting here in curriculum meetings and it's like, okay, it's this, it's that, it's whatever. And I would think that if you know the biggest change in education is coming down the pike, that you would be having discussions about it in terms of, folks, hold on, this is a complete sea change in what's going on. I hope you understand it, because as Elena had said, you know, people, if they're not following every meeting and following that, you know, you're not building up on that information, as she had mentioned, and I agree. So as a public service, as a PR, as doing the right thing to the taxpayers of this town, I would expect that the school committee would have open forum discussions about, here's what Common Core is, this is where it is, this is where it's going, this is what it's going to cost, it's totally different than what we're doing, this is why we're adopting it or not, or recommending that we adopt it or not. And like I said, the ask that I was ultimately envisioning is that if you vet it out fully and you find that it's something that you're really not that comfortable with, that you would lobby the state to stay with it, MCAS. And quite frankly, the standards that we have with MCAS are a lot better than what I've heard and read about here with Park and Common Core curriculum. And why would we trash the best system in the country? And why aren't we taking our system and having it go to other states versus killing the top student in the class and bringing in a C student to be the benchmark? I mean, I just don't get it. So that was my point, and people don't know about it, and it's time that people know about it, because by design it's been under the cover of darkness, because it's a top-down approach. And like I said, doing vetting it out and hearing it out, great. This was here, bringing in Mr. Gass here tonight because you know, he's got the background on it. He understands what's going on there. Barbie, you haven't heard back from the state, I don't think, at all, as far as inviting somebody to come out and speak. I didn't get a call
No,
back
I
from
have-
the state ed department
I
on it.
have heard from other, districts that they had said that they wouldn't send anyone out, they just don't have like the staffing to do that. I know that's not
That's
a
a
great.
convenient, yeah,
I know it's not a
excuse,
great
yeah.
answer to get, but we have received information that we can certainly utilize, We're also
Yeah.
going to have a meeting this Thursday, is our regular school committee meeting. We were gonna use the Connect Ed service to let the people know that we will be talking about Common Core, if anyone wants to.
Is the
you know.
Connect Ed that's our website, or our,
Yeah, the phone system.
oh, that's, okay, that's your, okay.
Yeah, so we'll send out a message, and anyone that wants to come to the meeting or tune in at home, if it's not,
Great.
you know, feasible for them to
And,
come out.
and that's all I'm saying, is let's just have robust dialogue about it, because it really should be, people should look at it and understand both sides. of
I
it.
know, I just wanna say,
Respectful
just,
dialogue without, can we agree that nothing more is gonna go in
Yeah,
print?
and
That
quite frankly,
puts
that
anybody
was,
down?
that, I wasn't putting anybody down. I
No,
said,
that's-
the reporter, Tim, asked me, what did you think? And I said, I was disappointed that I didn't feel that the school committee knew what they were talking about on Common Core.
well, we
But
gave you an hour and a half, Stuart, it wasn't
No,
like it
no,
wasn't
I
gonna be
know,
here.
I know, I know.
We know, and
We would've been
actually,
there till midnight.
Oh, I get that,
I mean,
no, and you gave me
I would
plenty
doubt
of
how much
time,
you
and I
know, I can
appreciate
say
that.
I would doubt how much you know, but I'm not going to put that in print. I mean, you don't know how much we know, we actually know, I think we know a good amount. I'm always
I've
open to
certainly
learning more.
educated myself
I'm
a lot more,
always
so
open
I
to learning
appreciate
more.
that,
And
but
that's all-
to say
that's
that
all.
it's been
Right.
under darkness, I mean, I tend
Not
to
you
disagree.
guys as
No,
a
I know,
school
I'm just
committee, I'm saying the
as a-
project as a whole
country, I don't
has
think-
been buried in the dark. I mean, it is
Yeah.
just,
Right.
if you really follow it all the way, you'll get it, but I digress, gentlemen. in the
But-
back.
Okay.
My name's Rick Marshall, I'm the state representative of Beverly, and I praise the selectmen and also the school committee. This information in the state in reference to Common Core has not been transparent. Nobody really knows what's going on. We have to be very thankful to Pioneer Institute, because they're coming out, they're spreading the transparency, and they're teaching all of us. It's very hard to understand when everything's hidden in the back doors. Little by little, the truth is coming out. The school committee here, they stayed with MCAS. I give them so much credit, because
Absolutely.
they did not get the answer. Other cities, my city rubber stamped it. We never had no one, they never invited anybody in, had zero type of reform.
Mhm.
Right now, what you're doing is you're starting off of a base, you're trying to work together, you're getting more information. That shows a lot right now.
Mhm.
This is how it's gonna start off. So if you all start to work together, have some common ground, which you're starting to do little by little, you'll come out ahead of what's going on. But that's what you're doing right now, it's a great start. And I expect what I'm seeing right now, because when no one's being informed, especially by the state, what's going on, what Common Core was in the first place, if they explained it in the beginning, you may not be here right now, but they never did that.
Right.
So it's neither side's fault, so
Right.
I praise, you're doing a great
again,
job.
Thank you, and again, to all due respect to the school committee, I don't mean to offend you, and it's certainly not what I intended, okay? And so if I've offended you, again, I apologize, because
Thank you. I will
that is not my
Going
intent, and I have
I wanna have dialogue.
so much
I wanna
respect
have
for you guys,
conversation.
and I know it's, you're elected, and, you know, you put your time in, and people, and we all do, and so I too am on the school building committee with you, and serve on that, and, so no ill will or disrespect intended with that quote, so that was not,
Well, thank you.
okay,
Thanks.
where I was going with it, so please accept my apology if you took it that way.
Thank you.
Any other discussion, any other thoughts on this topic? All right,
Thank you, Chair, appreciate
thank
it.
you, sir, we appreciate you, Mr. Gass, coming in, and
I've got some
appreciate
materials
you
here that
coming.
I'll
Great.
leave over here if people are.
absolutely. And we look forward to further dialogue, and that's awesome, thank you, thank you,
Okay.
appreciate you
Adjourn
coming
the
in.
school
You can
committee.
adjourn the school
Okay.
committee if you wish.
Maybe adjourn, thank you. Enjoy the rest of the night.
Yeah, you guys have a great night, thank you.
Thank you.